Hey there, everybody, I'm Jesse Weber, and thank you so much for joining us on our special live coverage of the Sean Diddy Combs criminal case out of federal court in New York. What an interesting day today. I would say, usually we do this lunchtime show where we take your questions for the next hour and a half. We break down court updates. No court today. No court today. They adjourned within 10 minutes of getting started. We're going to explain why. How does this delay the trial? I mean, weren't they supposed to finish up by July 4th? A lot of unanswered questions, but I'll tell you what, we are going to be taking your questions, your comments about this case again for the next hour and a half or so. We really want to dive into this because the prosecution is coming towards the end of the case. Have they proven sex trafficking? Have they proven racketeering conspiracy? Have they proven transportation to engage in prostitution? That's what we're going to talk about. So before I bring in my all-star panel that I have with me, I'm first going to start off with our in-court reporter, Law&Crime's very own Elizabeth Millner. Elizabeth, so good to see you. What happened? What happened? We were supposed to have court today.
I know. I was truly surprised because every day I wake up, or try to at least wake up at 4 a.m., get here by 6:30. We're all ready to go. I have my notepad. I have my pen. I'm ready. The judge gets on the bench and he's like, a juror is sick. And so we're going to adjourn for the day. Now, as far as just the more kind of reasons as far as what really happened, the judge gets on the bench and he says this juror was on his way to court this morning. What we did know about this particular juror is he is one of the alternates, but he did get sick on his way to court this morning. He had vertigo and then he turned back around to go home. And so they're kind of monitoring the situation right now. There was no need, as far as further action goes. They're just waiting to see and make sure that the juror is okay to continue on Friday and then possibly have more discussions just about what had happened if that juror isn't able to get better. But hopefully the juror is able to get better so that way court can begin on Friday. But really today, Jesse, court was about 30 minutes long. I mean, outside of the judge revealing to everyone that a juror is sick, and so we're going to adjourn for the day, which, by the way, both sides did agree upon this. And so what ended up happening is probably he sat down on the bench by 9 o'clock, 9:30. We were all out of the courtroom and everyone was kind of like, oh, well, we have another free day because then we don't have court tomorrow too. So it was a pretty interesting turn of events today, even though there was absolutely no testimony today.
Yep, because tomorrow's Juneteenth, so no court. So what does that do to the schedule? Don't they want to be finished by July 4th? I mean, do they realistically believe that's going to wrap up? Because you have how long's the defense's case going to be? You have closing arguments, you have jury instructions. Talk to us about how this messes up the whole schedule.
Yeah, it really kind of does shift everything, especially because not only do we not have court on Thursday, but Friday's kind of a smaller, shorter schedule. We're only going to court from 9 to 1 because one of the jurors is celebrating, I think, their child's graduation. So that's pretty exciting. But as far as just the delay of the case, it really is kind of pushing everything a little bit back. So first of all, the government planned on resting their case today, but that was before the cross-examination of Special Agent Alyssa Penland kind of took a little bit longer than I think the government had planned. And then they were planning to call Brendan Paul on the stand and then another summary witness. So as far as just even that, we haven't even heard from Brendan Paul just yet. So I assume now that we didn't have court today that he'll take up much of Friday, if not all of Friday, because he still has to do his cross-examination, even though the prosecution said that his direct will only be about an hour and a half or 90 minutes. But depending on how long the cross-examination takes, I assume Brendan Paul will be on the stand again majority of Friday. Then there's one final witness, that being the summary witness. So sorry, everybody. It doesn't seem like Christina Coram will be called as a government witness. I doubt she'll be that summary witness because they named who that person was and it wasn't Christina Coram. And so then what happens with the defense case is once they pick up the case, Mark Agnifilo said his defense case could last anywhere between 2 to 5 trial days. So it's still a pretty short amount of time, but I don't know how much of this delay as far as today goes will really push things back because the judge's whole plan altogether was to make sure that we were kind of done by 4th of July. So we'll see kind of what happens, especially when the defense takes over and they do their case, how much of a really big trial delay we might have. Will we get out of the 4th of July? We'll see.
So we have some questions coming in for you. First of all, we have this super chat question from Smarty Pants. Smarty Pants, thank you so much. I'm going to save your super chat question for a little bit later for the panel. So don't think we forgot about you, Smarty Pants. And I'm also just waiting, I'm just trying to get as many times I could say Smarty Pants as possible. But no, we're going to answer that question later. This is from Rita Connors, though. Hey, Jesse and Elizabeth, do you think the prosecution will put on a rebuttal case? So after the defense's case, are they going to put on a rebuttal case? Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything about a rebuttal case. I would assume, and I say that kind of with, a little bit of hesitancy, that they would put on a rebuttal case. I feel like that's normally what we see, especially in a big trial like this. It's been a lot of testimony that these jurors have heard. It's been going on for weeks at this point. And so depending on, I feel like, where the defense goes with their case, I feel like maybe the government will call maybe 1 or 2 witnesses, but I don't think it'll be for a long time frame. But they haven't said anything yet. This is just me kind of guessing at this point.
Elizabeth, I don't know if you have the answer to this, and maybe if our producers will have an opportunity to look at this too, but I've seen this question come up a little bit. It's from Danny. Question, is there a conflict of interest for Tenny Garagos representing Sean Combs, which she currently is in this case, and Christina Coram? Have you seen anything that Tenny Garagos is representing Christina Coram?
I have not. That's honestly the first time I'm hearing of this. And so I don't want to answer that question just because I'm not 100% sure that's true. But it is a good question if it is true. I will say that.
No, it is. We'll look into that a little bit more. I haven't heard anything about it. By the way, when you talk about Brendan Paul, who's come up a lot in testimony, what do you anticipate his testimony is going to be? What is the value of his testimony for this overall racketeering, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution case?
Well, I think probably the big thing might be whether or not he participated in setting up the rooms for hotel nights or freak-offs, that sort, because I believe when he started working with Sean Combs, it was around possibly the Jane time frame. So not sure if he had overlap with Cassie necessarily, because that was what they ended their relationship in 2018. So it'll be interesting to hear what Brendan Paul has to say, because he had been working with Diddy up until just last year. And so I'm interested to see what he has to say, not only about possibly setting up hotel rooms, but also what he has to say in terms of drugs and how that all kind of went down. Because remember, everyone, he was named in one of the civil lawsuits as an alleged drug mule. And so I feel like because he had to invoke his Fifth Amendment right and not to kind of perjure himself, or the Fifth Amendment right not to self-incriminate, I should say that, and that he was given an immunity order, that I do believe it has something to do, just kind of like the other assistants who got immunity deals, that it might have something to do with just the amount of drugs that might have been bought and the amount of drugs that were also paid for by Sean Combs that were given to him, but that were, obtained by the assistance from drug dealers. So it'll be interesting to see what he all has to say when he eventually testifies.
He's this former Syracuse University basketball player. You might remember he was arrested the same day as the raids on Sean Combs' properties. He was facing drug charges. That case was dropped. Wonder if it was maybe for his potential participation in this case, although I know he was granted immunity at the beginning of this week. But again, the more you talk about drugs, right, where the prosecution says that Sean Combs was using drugs to keep victims compliant, or the allegation that drug offenses are some of the underlying predicate crimes of racketeering conspiracy, you can ultimately see the value of his testimony. Okay, we got a super chat comment from Carol Mogan. Thank you to the dynamic duo, Jesse and Elizabeth. So kind. And by the way, I have to tell you, before we came on, Elizabeth shared an AI video that she found online of us as little babies, doing reporting, which is great. So very, very kind, yes. very, very sweet out there. Everybody is interested in doing that. But no, we appreciate all the kind comments. Okay. Elizabeth, I want you to set the record straight while I have a little bit more time with you. A lot of questions about what this case is and what this case is about and not about. So Janetta Monger says, question to Jesse, what about the underage children, people we've been hearing about from the beginning of Diddy's dilemma? Are we going to hear anything about children being used or involved?
Well, I think, that's one of kind of the big misconceptions about this federal trial specifically, is whether or not minors were involved. And I will say this, everybody, we haven't heard any ounce of evidence that minors were involved or that Diddy was allegedly doing things sexual with minors. We haven't heard any of that in this trial. And I think that's one of the kind of the big misconceptions, is that people think that children are involved, other celebrities are involved. But so far as the testimony we've heard so far, it really just has to do with just the victims that have already testified, right? That being Cassie, or the alleged victims, I should say. But again, that being Cassie, that being Jane, and that being Mia, obviously Jane and Mia using pseudonyms while they testify. But as far as just any mention of anybody under the age of of 18 years old. That hasn't happened at all so far.
Got a very important question for you, Elizabeth. This is from Fabiola Delgado Lebron. Question for Elizabeth. Have you drank your electrolytes for the day? And did you get to gather a vibe from what you could see? So have you drank your electrolytes, and what's the vibe in the courtroom?
Yeah, so the electrolytes, yes, I'm drinking my water. I'm making sure I have my water because it's a little hot out here. But the vibes in the courtroom today, I think a lot of people just wanted to know what Brendan Paul had to say once he was going to be on the witness stand. Now, as far as that happening today, obviously we didn't even see him appear inside the main courtroom today. But it was a packed courtroom at the start, as it normally is for this trial. I was expecting that maybe after Cassie testified, maybe after Jane testified, maybe even after Mia testified, that kind of the interest would die down just a little bit. But no, it's still a packed courtroom every single day, to the point they have to turn people away, put them into the media overflow room. And by the way, everyone, if you're here in New York City and you want to come check out the trial, you're more than welcome to do so. It is free. It's open to the public. If you're not able to get into the main courtroom, because normally to get into the main courtroom, you do have to get here bright and early, I would say probably before maybe around that 6:30 to 7 a.m. time frame. But if you wanted to just check it out and see what it's like to be inside a federal courthouse or federal courtroom, seeing what a trial proceeding of this magnitude is really like, it's free, it's open to the public. And a lot of people, even when they're on vacation, even when they're just hanging out with their friends, they realize the Diddy trial is happening in this very courtroom right behind me, they just go up in there. And I've even heard cases where, you know, people have been bringing their children in there, their young children in there, presumably just to kind of, you know, watch everything that's going on. They have their kids with them, and so they see kind of, and I think it's also kind of interesting too, because it's kind of like people are watching it like a movie theater. Obviously there's no food in the courtroom, there's no popcorn, so it's not like that. But as far as the oohing and awing of the case in the overflow room, I have heard that definitely does happen a lot. But as far as the mood goes today in general, I think a lot of people were like, oh dang, you know, we have the rest of the day to ourselves. So I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. To me, it's a good thing. But, you know, I think maybe for Diddy, who probably just wants this trial to be over with, I think maybe he was a little disappointed. Possibly. I'm just, you know, guessing there again.
What about the jurors? You know, we had a new juror put on the jury, right? What is their whole dynamic like?
Yeah, they're dynamic from what I can see of them. Like when they enter the courtroom, they always come in a single file line. As far as just the way they sit down, they're even kind of, they line up in the way that they will be seated whenever they get into the jury box. And so from what I'm seeing of them, they do have some types of conversations here and there, you know, during sidebars, just moments where, like, you know, not when testimony's happening, nothing like that. But it does seem like certain, you know, jurors do take likings to other jurors. Obviously, I don't know what their conversations are of when they are doing the sidebar. But as far as the dynamic goes, I really kind of feel like maybe they're just like one big team, just all in this together for now. It's been more than a month of testimony. And so I could definitely see just the dynamic. But even with the juror being dismissed just this past Monday, I will say I haven't seen so much of, like, you know, maybe, you know, a sadness or people being upset that this juror isn't here anymore. I haven't seen it, but maybe this is something that they've talked about kind of privately back in the jury room. But as far as just the demeanor overall, I feel like from what I see, nothing has really changed.
And by the way, Diddy's demeanor. There were sketches that came out. I mean, I don't even know if we have them published yet. There are sketches where it looks like he's in praying hands. What's his demeanor been like? We're coming towards the end of the prosecution's case. You wonder or not, does he feel concerned? We have been having discussions for quite some time here during the lunchtime shows that it looks like he will probably be convicted of the prostitution charges, because this seems like such a straightforward case. You wonder if that's a concern for him. Obviously carries up to 10 years in prison. But then he's facing racketeering and sex trafficking charges, which can carry up to life in prison. I mean, racketeering, yes. Sex trafficking, minimum of 15 years. How is he doing? Can you get a sense of that?
Yeah, it's interesting kind of seeing Diddy's demeanor. Honestly, it's just interesting in general, seeing Diddy in the flesh and having seen him even before this trial begins in terms of me attending those pre-trial hearings and that sort. So I've seen him in the jumpsuit from MDC and out of the jumpsuit from MDC too, where he's kind of in his more court attire. But I will say, every day when he comes into the courtroom, what he does is kind of scan the entire courtroom as far as kind of who is there. Normally, when the way we're seated, it's the public on the left side and then the press on the right side. So he does kind of look over to the public side first. There are some supporters who do attend the court hearings, and that he'll do the prayer hands to, he'll do the love sign to, he'll just kind of say like thank you. Obviously, if his family's in that courtroom, to bright and early. They've been kind of coming in just a little bit late after the jury's already seated, that type of thing. But when they are there, when he first walks in, obviously he says hello to whoever it is, whether it be his mom, his sons, or his PR team, that type of thing. But even just in terms of when testimony is happening, and Jesse, I've said this kind of a number of times, where it just feels like he is a very active participant in his defense. He's jotting down notes. He's listening to testimony. I will say when the videos were shown yesterday, he was listening to the headphones. I think he might have had some role in kind of picking out which time codes were going to be shown to the jury, because there was a moment yesterday before the jury was brought in where Brendan Paul invoked his Fifth Amendment right, got the immunity deal, but Diddy wasn't present for that part. He was actually in the back reviewing video exhibits and evidence and that type of thing. And so from what I've seen, even just in terms of how early he gets here to start trial preparation, because there's been kind of issues at MDC in terms of, him being able to review text messages and videos and being able to do it, especially knowing that this trial is still going on, that he gets to court, from what I understand, at 7 a.m. and they even kind of have extended his time at the courthouse until I think 6 p.m. So even though, for a day like this that we have no testimony going on for the rest of the day, court doesn't pick back up until Friday, I assume that he's really just still in trial prep mode, still making sure that every duck is in a row, especially as the defense case is about to start gearing up. But from what I can see of him every day, it doesn't seem like he's going to let the mask slip, in terms of if we could feel that maybe, the weight of this federal criminal trial is weighing on him. He doesn't show it when I see him inside the courtroom. From what I can see, he really just kind of, again, seems kind of neutral in terms of demeanor. I wouldn't say he's arrogant. I wouldn't say he's cocky, nothing like that. But I would say if there is any pressure that he's feeling around this point, he just does not let that slip one bit.
That's interesting. By the way, in regards to that issue we talked about before, this is from Shauna C. It's a super chat comment. Thank you so much, Shauna C. It says, it was mentioned in transcripts by Inner City Press, I believe, when Jane was on stage, that KK is being represented by Tenny Garagos. It was a side conversation where that was revealed. That's interesting. I can't independently confirm that. Maybe we can if we take a break, or we'll look into that. But it's just an interesting development nonetheless. You talk about the people who show up for him. How much support is he getting in and outside of that courtroom? I know we talked about Kanye West showing up, couldn't actually get into the courtroom, went into the overflow room, but how much support is he getting, Sean Combs?
I think I would say it's hard to put like a number on it, whether it's 50-50, 75-25. I wouldn't put a hard number on it necessarily. In terms of family support, we do see family members supporting him every single day in terms of trial. It's either his mother who's inside the courtroom, it's his sister who's inside that courtroom, it's one of his three sons, or it's the three of them all together. I will say one thing, and obviously the family does support him in terms of just they believe that he's innocent, but I haven't seen his daughters attend court since maybe the first week. I possibly believe they may come back for closing arguments, especially maybe towards the end of the trial, maybe even when the defense starts their case, maybe they'll make an appearance, but I can't confirm that at all. I'm just kind of guessing here. But in terms of just support, it does seem like he does have some supporters even inside the courtroom as far as the public goes, where I don't know if it's people just like in awe of a celebrity, he's on trial and they just want to say hello or just see him in the flesh, but it does seem like he has some people on his side as in terms of people wanting to see more celebrities come to support him outside of Kanye West. That hasn't happened yet, and I will say that is one of the surprising things. But I also will say this, is that Gene Deal, one of Diddy's former security guards, I have seen him in the courthouse, not in the courtroom, but I believe he went to the media overflow room on the day that I did see him in the courthouse. But as far as just, maybe other famous faces that we may have thought would attend this trial, we haven't seen that yet beyond Friday the 13th when Kanye West wanted to, just make his grand appearance for about half an hour or so.
Yeah, we're playing this video of him walking into the courtroom. Elizabeth Millner, thank you so much. Appreciate it. You've been working so hard. Take the day. Enjoy. Have a little bit of fun. You deserve it. And thank you so much. As always, you're a fan favorite.
Thank you. Thanks, Jesse.